How do you get to be okay with a to-do list that feels like it's never going to end? If you'll notice, I am in not my office. I'm in Colorado Springs for the Superstores Writers Conference. I thought about recording 2 weeks worth of videos before I left for the conference. And then I thought, no, let me just do it at the conference. It'll be more real. It'll be more me. And then it'll actually give me an opportunity to try out recording on something other than my home equipment. And honestly, I'm a little bit aggravated because I feel like the camera and the mic on my phone is almost as good, if not better, than the setup that I have at my house in the home office. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if I just don't know how to use the equipment, but it is what it is. So this is what I've been thinking about. The other day I was running errands. I had to go to the post office to drop some stuff off that had to go in the mail for taxes. It was business related. I wasn't not doing work, but the whole way to the post office and the whole way back, I just felt so anxious. I felt so anxious that I wasn't in front of my computer, that there could be emails coming in that I wasn't seeing, that there could be messages, that there was other work that I could have been doing. And as I was feeling that, I was remembering back when I first started the business full time, having to do something similar, go to town, drop something off at the post office, and then go back home and get back to work. But I remember whenever I did that a few years ago, I stopped at the coffee shop and I grabbed a coffee for me and Jessica. And I remember thinking about how nice it was that I worked for myself and I worked from home and I could just go to town and take care of these things without having to feel rushed or guilty or anything like that. And so then I thought, what changed? How come doing the same thing a few years ago felt freeing and exciting, and then now feels like it's just anxiety inducing and like I'm doing something wrong? Like I felt guilty. I felt like I need to be back in my cage and getting work done. And I think part of it was, yeah, like we got a lot more work to do now. And so yeah, I wasn't as overwhelmed with the endless to-do list 3 years ago as I am now. But the other thing is, I think whenever I did it a few years ago, in my mind, that was my job. My job was to bring the stuff to the mail and mail the 1099s before the deadline. It was part of my day. And I didn't feel like I was taking anything away from anyone or anything else. But for some reason now when I do those things, if I'm not like actively checking emails, if I'm not actively talking to clients, if I'm not actively doing some other work, I constantly feel like I'm not meeting my obligations. And sometimes even whenever I am doing those things, I feel guilty that I'm not doing the other things on the list. And for the longest time, I used to think I just need to get ahead. If I can just put in some extra hours and get caught up on things where I don't feel like I'm behind anymore, then I'll be able to actually get my work done without feeling guilty. I'll be able to take a day off without feeling overwhelmed. But then I realized that's never going to happen. And I don't want that to happen. Like we never want to be at the point where we don't have any work to do, because then that wouldn't be good for business. Like we're always going to have some sort of line or pipeline of work that needs to be done. There's just no way to expect one tax return to come in ready for me to prepare at the exact same time that the one before it just got finished. So if the work's not going to come in on this exact perfect schedule, then the two options are either not having enough work to do or having more work to do than we can get done all at once instantaneously. And so it's actually a good thing as a business owner to have a little bit of a pipeline of things that need to be done and that aren't going to get your attention right now. So here's some things that have kind of helped me with this a little bit, and being okay knowing that I'm working on this, even though there's something else that I could be working on. One thing is just scheduling the work. Like I know right now I'm doing this YouTube video and that means I'm not checking emails, but I do have some time set aside later to check emails. And so I know that those emails will be answered. And that makes me feel a little bit less anxious about doing something else right now whenever there's other things that could be done. So one thing that we're doing within the business this year that's really helping with this is as tax returns come in, we're looking at a capacity calendar. I have a spreadsheet that has every single week listed and the number of hours that we can spend on tax returns that week. And then knowing that tax return and knowing that client, I have a good idea of how many hours it should take us to complete that tax return. So that I'm assigning those tax returns to each week based on the capacity that we have. So I know if we're at capacity for all the tax returns that we're going to get done this week, that the next tax return that comes in isn't getting done this week. And so I schedule it for next week or whenever the next available slot is. So knowing that those jobs, knowing that those tax returns have a place on the calendar to be worked on really helps to feel good about working on things in a certain order, even though there's other things that could be worked on. But the second thing that's helped with this is communicating those expectations and the schedule with anyone who may be impacted by that work. Because it's one thing if I know that the work's going to get done in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, But if the other person doesn't know that, then there's still that anxiety, there's still that expectation that I feel like I'm letting them down. So now when we schedule those tax returns out, I send a message to the client saying, hey, we got your information. We have your stuff scheduled for this date. It's gonna start then. After that point, it typically takes 1 to 2 weeks to knock out your tax return. If you have any questions in the meantime, let us know, but you probably won't hear from us until then when we start working on your taxes. And I honestly can't believe it took this long for me to figure out to do that, to schedule tax returns, and more importantly, communicate that schedule to the client, because that has just been such a big unlock for us where I don't feel guilty. I don't feel like I have to constantly check in with the client and say, hey, you sent your stuff in, just giving you a status update. There's no update. We're still waiting to start. I don't like that. I also don't like saying, hey, we're going to get in touch with you whenever we start this, but we don't know when that's going to be, so don't bother us until then. I don't like that either. But being able to say, we're starting your tax return on February 6th, you'll hear from us then, I feel like that frees up that anxiety in our head so that we can focus on the thing in front of us, and it gives expectations to the client so you know what to expect. You know that you're not waiting on us for anything. You know when to be available to be able to answer questions about your taxes. And the third thing that's really helped, it's really more of a mindset thing. It's like, just recognizing that the thing that I'm working on is my job. You know, if I'm recording a YouTube video, that is part of my job. If I'm answering emails, that is part of my job. If I'm speaking at a conference, that is part of my job. And so it's not like I have this job over here, which is just reviewing tax returns or just helping Ben out if he needs help. Those are parts of my job too. But if I think of those things as my only job, then whenever I do this kind of stuff, then I feel guilty for not doing the other things. So if I just recognize like, no, I am performing my job right now. I'm doing the thing that I'm supposed to do. I'm helping people stay educated about taxes. I'm reaching out to the author community. I'm preparing a talk or whatever it is. There's like, if that's my job, then I feel better about it. I feel okay with it, knowing that there is still other stuff to do. So how about you? I know like as an author, you have to do your books, you have to do your revisions, you have to do your edits, you have to do your cover design. You have all these things you have to work on. How do you feel okay whenever you're working on one thing, knowing that there's just such a long list of things to do after that? Then that's just writing the book. You still have social media and bookkeeping and marketing and everything else that you do. Like, how do you feel okay with doing certain things in the moment, knowing that there's other things that you could and maybe should be doing? Like, what are your tips for that? Because the things that I shared, they help me a little bit, but there's still areas where I just get really anxious if I'm not doing literally everything all at once. I still have this thing where I don't feel fully relaxed until after 5 o'clock or until the weekend, just because I feel like there's this expectation of me that I need to be available for someone all the time. And we built this business to not be that way. We built this business to be very, very flexible on time, to where I can come and speak at conferences, or we can take the family somewhere, or I can stop and get a coffee for Jessica at the coffee shop. So anyway, curious to hear your thoughts. Curious to know if anyone else feels this way or if I'm just the only one. Otherwise, I will see you next time.